how I got into this mix.
This is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network. Today I'm talking with an old friend of mine who is a young activist, a journalist, who briefly lived with the Houston Freethinkers and in 2014 lived in the Freethinker House. He's been active writing articles, doing videos, doing astrology, doing all kinds of things to serve as part of the conscious resistance that we believe in, this larger movement. Cassius, how are you doing?
Doing great, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, and I wanted to give you a chance today to talk to my audience. We talk on a regular basis, and we're both involved in a number of different projects, but I hadn't really given my audience an opportunity to know who you are yet, and you're always sharing my work, so I figured this would be an opportunity to return the favor and show people a bit about what you're involved in. We're going to be talking about everything from FDA corruption, big pharma. We're going to talk about the documentary you're working on. We're going to talk about alternatives to big pharma, and we will also eventually get to agorism or agorism and your views on that. But first, let's go ahead and give the audience a chance to know you. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got started.
Well, I'm Cassius. I'm 20 years old. I first got into activism in 2012 when I actually saw some of Adam Kokesh's videos on YouTube. Then I got into people like James Corbett, the Corbett Report, and I added you on Facebook in 2012. Then I decided to just randomly hit up John Vibes one day and ask him if they needed another writer at IntelliHub. So I started writing for that website in April 2013, and by the beginning of 2014, I started writing with Activist Post and the Anti-Media, then wrote with Anti-Media for a few years before starting my own website, Era of Wisdom. And now I'm focusing on Era of Wisdom, trying to make my own videos, writing my own articles about things that I feel are important, focusing on the history of how everything came to be this way, trying to just, on my path of learning, show people what I learn, create content, and keep growing, you know?
Tell us a little bit about what that title means to you, Era of Wisdom.
It's about creating an era of wisdom. It's about, I kind of have a dream of one day there being this whole paradigm of independent colleges and kind of like the way trade schools work. I dream of kind of an era of time where people seek to get their education or their, perspective on the world in a focused but different way from the way that academia works today. I want to learn about where everything came from. I think about, I used to think, what is the world made of? What is the world? Who are the most powerful people in the world? Who are the people that made everything that's around me? And where does everything come from? So if we were to picture what the world is made of and who the most powerful people in the world are, we would be looking at a lot of corporations that we probably never heard of that created everything that we have around us. People know about things like Prozac, but do they know where it came from? So it's about learning where everything came from and just knowing everything that we don't question, the clarity that we can acquire from knowing where everything came from and what everything is. I think that's more deeply satisfying than almost anything that I know.
Yeah, and also I really, I feel stronger about what I said before, that to me is in line with what we try to do with the conscious resistance and in general just promoting a conscious awareness, a mindfulness in all of our activities, and definitely understanding the true, breadth and scope of history and how world events have played out is important and will allow an individual to have a more informed mind to make better decisions in their path and their pursuit of freedom. So let's talk a little bit about the FDA corruption. I know that that's a big issue. That's something big that you're focusing on right now. You mentioned to me before that you're planning to take a trip pretty soon to come to Texas, actually, to come to the Austin area to do interviews and to conduct interviews for your documentary that you're working on. Tell us a little bit about that and what got you into studying the corruption of the Food and Drug Administration.
Well, what got me into it is the fact that my mom has been taking several pharmaceutical drugs since as long as I could remember, and she ended up getting multiple sclerosis and having a lot of problems from taking such things as Ritalin, Prozac, and all kinds of other drugs. And she's in kind of a constant state of fatigue, and every single day she says something like, I'm feeling really tired right now, like my brain isn't working right now. And I've seen this my entire life, and it gave me the motivation to learn where these drugs come from and why they're around. I've been depressed as a kid, and I've had doctors try to give me Prozac when I was 14. They gave me the medication, and I never took it because I knew it just wasn't right. So that's the way that I got motivated to learn about this. And some other things made me want to research the FDA and other things deeper when I realized that the choice for one of the things that got me into it was learning that Donald Rumsfeld used to be the CEO of the company Searly, and I started to notice connections between the government and pharmaceutical corporations. So with that in mind, I decided to research FDA eugenics because that's another topic of interest. That's a whole other can of worms. But
Well, briefly, just give the audience a quick definition of what eugenics is.
Eugenics is it's related to Darwinism. It has deep roots in Britain in the 1800s with families like the Darwin, Galton, Huxley family. It's pretty much what Hitler was interested in. It's the idea that the racially pure are fit to live, and the racially unpure or genetically impure are fit to die. It's basically a philosophy that's about the perpetuation of one group of people at the expense of the other, with the use of, scientific things to sterilize people, to control people. There was kind of a heyday of eugenics in the 20s and 30s with groups like the Eugenics Society of Northern California, the American Eugenics Society that Hitler actually referenced in Mein Kampf, the American eugenicists, as motivation for his philosophy. So that's eugenics.
And so how does that tie into the FDA and corruption at the FDA?
Well, it's quite a can of worms, and it's quite difficult to tangibly analyze. But what I can tell you is that I discovered the longest serving head of the FDA commissioner, is Margaret Hamburg. From 2009 to 2015, she held the highest office at the FDA, with the ability to appoint officials to regulatory authority positions in the FDA. Those authority positions would determine what drugs and what chemicals in food are legal and illegal. Well, Margaret Hamburg is the daughter of two people that were both longtime presidents of the American Eugenics Society, her mother and her father. Her father was the head of Carnegie Corporation of New York during the same years that he was the president of the American Eugenics Society. And what's interesting to me about that is that the philosophy of eugenics itself, the philosophy that some are fit to be sterilized and the poor are meant to be kept down while the wealthy and racially pure should survive, that philosophy was funded into existence in the first place by people like, or organizations like the Carnegie Institution and the Rockefeller Foundation. So that's just, a little bit of interesting history. What we can derive from that, it's difficult to say.
Well, I think that at least points to an obvious influence by these people, at the least, because for any student of history, knows very well that these names you mentioned, Rockefeller, Carnegie, and other well-known families have influential positions of power in the United States and some of them in the world abroad. And then they get themselves into positions of power in education and medical and government and media, and all these various areas of influence and spheres of influence that people pay attention to, and that includes the Food and Drug Administration. And so, one might be concerned when the head of the Food and Drug Administration is coming from a background of promoting, that certain races need to be forced sterilized, or that the population needs to be reduced by a mass amount of people. It might make you question, okay, what type of things is this Food and Drug Administration going to approve?
Absolutely. Margaret Hamburg was on the board of directors of dental corporation Henry Schein. Henry Schein is one of the largest dental corporations in the world, and they're the largest manufacturer of mercury amalgam fillings, which is something that could serve quite a potent eugenic purpose from that perspective. Mercury fillings. My mom also had mercury fillings, and I think they may have contributed to the depression that made her want to start using antidepressants in the first place.
So you mentioned, when you're talking about influence from outside forces, right? And, there's this phrase that gets tossed around, big pharma. Who or what exactly is big pharma, and, where can we see influence from these corporations?
Well, who is big pharma? There are corporations like Pfizer. Pfizer was founded in 1849 in New York City. There's companies like Eli Lilly and Company, who were founded in 1876. I have the page up right here. And these two corporations are some of the largest manufacturers of SSRI antidepressants, with Pfizer being behind drugs such as Effexor and Zoloft, and Eli Lilly and Company being behind Prozac. These are both Fortune 500 companies that were founded in the era of time where figures such as John D. Rockefeller rose to prominence, an era of industrialized snake oil, rampant snake oil salesmen, and all kinds of people looking to capitalize on all kinds of things. A lot of these largest pharmaceutical corporations were founded the mid to end of the 1800s. And from there, they made partnerships with other large economic powers at the time, like Standard Oil. And the roots of Big Pharma, as I learned from people like James Corbett, it really is the same roots as Big Oil. And Big Agriculture comes from this Big Pharma, Big Oil, petrochemical, industrial era of America as well.
So you mentioned a couple of companies there. Do companies like biotechnology companies like Monsanto, who work on genetically modified food, genetically engineered, technology, do they in any way have influence over the FDA from your research?
Absolutely. There was one person, of course, who was elected to a high-ranking position in the FDA. I forgot his name, but we've all seen the memes of the revolving door between Monsanto and the FDA.
There's Michael Taylor.
Yeah, Michael Taylor. So there's that, and what's interesting to me is that Monsanto is kind of a new development in this world of big pharma, the chemical corporations, and the real old players in this game are people like Bayer. And Bayer Crop Science is, up there with Monsanto and Syngenta and all of that. And of course, Bayer was founded around the time of World War I by Carl Duisberg, the inventor of mustard gas. And, Bayer was incorporated into the IG Farben big consolidation of chemical companies that was the chemical foundation of Nazi Germany. And then Bayer was separated from IG Farben, and then, it's all a big incestuous mix of chemical corporations, petroleum corporations, pharmaceutical corporations. They tried to, after the war, convert mustard gas, literally use mustard gas to try to treat cancer.
Yeah, so so there's obvious this I think it would probably be, I don't want to say common sense, but definitely it seems like people are aware that these things are going on, but it's important to understand the historical deeper roots, because otherwise you can never really do anything about it. You can kind of have a general sense that yes, there's this entity that we collectively call big pharma that influences medicine. Ben Swan's been doing some great recent reports, reality checks on, or his Truth in Media reports on this very topic on FDA corruption and big pharma. But it's absolutely important to understand the names and the faces behind these various movements, because in a lot of ways I feel like by labeling it big pharma, we've got like big ag, and or just the government, right? You have this sort of word that encapsulates an idea and thousands of people, and it encapsulates an institution, but it doesn't really represent the fact that there are actually people making these choices. You know what I mean? It kind of puts it in the abstract, like big pharma, there's this sort of anomalous being that we're going against. Like, no, there's people, there are names and faces and people who are making decisions that are actually affecting people's lives and creating this corruption and keeping harmful medicines in the market and keeping beneficial medicines suppressed. So let's move on to that. What are, I know that you're not only a critic of the FDA from a corruption standpoint, but actually of the medicine, the drugs that they push themselves. So tell us a little bit about what are some of the flaws in this, Western, strictly kind of antibiotic, mainstream medicine apparatus.
Well, what I've noticed about pharmaceutical drugs and this style of treatment is the fact that it seems to abruptly interrupt the natural processes of the body and the natural psychological trials and tribulations that we go through in life to become who we are. These medicines tend to abruptly interrupt these natural processes and do some very specific process, like an SSRI antidepressant. It's a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor that just takes the part of your brain that produces serotonin and just takes that specific little piece and changes it. In the whole grand scheme of things, in the way your mind works, you can't just take one little element of it and switch it. The withdrawals from SSRIs are extreme and last sometimes up to 6 months or longer. And I think that the way that naturopathic medicine as a whole tends to work better is in the way that it works with the body's natural ways of dealing with things.
Can you define naturopathic?
Naturopathic medicine, well, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's medicine from nature, medicine that might be maybe an extract of a plant or an actual plant.
Gotcha.
I will define it in better detail in the documentary, but
So tell us a little bit about that as well before we get more into the benefits of naturopathic medicine. We're talking about the flaws of big pharma. We've talked a little bit about the corruption. Tell us about the documentary. I mean, is this you have any idea of when you're expecting to complete this project? Are you just getting started, or what all exactly will it encompass?
we're just getting started, but we anticipate it being completed in about 2 months. There's going to be probably about 3 parts to the documentary. The first part will cover the early history of pharmaceutical medicine and the pharmaceutical giants that are still around today, going back to about 1850, the late 1800s. And then the second part will be about how the medicines affect people and people's experiences with them, the lawsuits that these pharmaceutical corporations have faced, and all the organizations that were founded to speak out against these pharmaceutical medications. And then part 3 will probably be about the FDA corruption, the forces that allow this to continue, and the solutions, the naturopathic alternatives to these medications, and solutions. What the pharmaceutical corporations actually do, and I'm going to put really in black and white so people can understand what these corporations are, the exact names of the companies, and the people involved, so that people will understand, like if there was a college course on this, it would be in that type of format,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it sounds great, and I'm glad that, and as I said, Ben Swan, others are like yourself are focusing, James Corbett, are focusing on these topics, because obviously health and medicine is absolutely important, and I think it's probably one of the most difficult areas to really get people to question things because of their false, belief in authority figures and people wearing lab coats. So whether that means a doctor or, just peer-reviewed journals, things like that, which have their place and, they serve a purpose to a degree, but those also have been used to promote, credentialism, where people basically just don't take anything from someone unless they don't believe someone. They're less likely to believe either of us, for example, than somebody who is wearing a lab coat. Now, obviously, there are reasons for that. If somebody's gone to plenty of years of medical school and they have skills that the average person doesn't possess, but that alone doesn't mean that the things that they are saying are factual or true. And it's also absolutely important to look into and see the various conflicts of interest and how those might affect their decision making and the things they promote. I mean, I know for a fact, man, whenever I was using a lot of drugs, I started to have plenty of stomach and health issues, and for years I just like ignored it. I was just getting worse and worse, and I was kind of just not ready to do anything about it. This was from when I was probably 18 or 19 until I didn't finally go find out what was wrong with me till like 6 or 7 years later. And part of the reason that it took me so long is after a couple of years of just like, oh my God, this is getting pretty bad. My stomach is just constantly in pain. I went to the doctor to go see the doctor that I'd seen my whole life, the pediatrician or whatever, and I was like 24 or 25 at the time. So I was like one of the oldest patients, but I was like, all right, let me go back to the doctor. I haven't been in years. And I go there, and there's these two young guys who were wearing lab coats type thing. They look like they were supposed to be doctors. I don't know if they actually were, but they're like, oh, your regular guy is out of town or he's gone, so we'll be seeing you today. I never met these guys before, and so they're like, okay, so tell us what's wrong with you. And I was just like, man, like I've been like dealing with so much stomach pain, digestive issues, just explain it. And I swear, dude, I didn't explain this to them for more than 5 minutes before these guys are like, you know what? You're stressed out, it's stressed. And they literally handed me a box of Lexapro, dude. They handed me like a whole box full of Lexapro, like antidepressants, after knowing me for less than 5 minutes, and just, that's what they gave me. And like, I left there, I don't even think I ended up taking it one time, because a friend of mine had also been prescribed that, and he just said that, he could tell it made him angrier, and like it just made him like not himself. So, I took the box with me, and like the next day I really thought about it, and I just ended up throwing it away, and that just pissed me off for a long time. I was like, you know what, these people don't want to help me, like forget it, I'll deal with it myself, And it was another couple years before I bothered even trying to do anything about it, because I was just so disgusted by the fact that these people were just trying to give me these pills and they didn't even know me, So this is a real thing. This is the way that they are trained to be pill pushers and to, get people on these medicines. You discussed, some of the flaws, like you mentioned SSRIs, and you touched on naturopathic medicine, but let's talk more about that, some of the solutions, as you said you're going to talk about in your documentary, the benefits of naturopathic medicine, and what does it take to be a healthy person if we're not going to be, and that mentally, physically, etc., if we're not going to be on these big pharma drugs.
Absolutely. So that's what it boils down to. It boils down to what was the cause of the problem in the first place, and what is health? What is health? Buying the food that we do from these grocery stores today, it's difficult to know what is healthy. What is healthy? So I think it's a lifelong process discovering what makes us personally feel healthy, what kind of food we eat that would benefit us to eat, I think we have to customize our diets and our ways of being healthy to the fullest for us personally. And yeah, we have to, what if we just decided, okay, let's divide up health into several different categories of the body, and then research for each one of those categories something to consume on a regular basis that keeps that part of your body healthy. That's the way I'd probably approach it. I've never done that yet. I don't think the problem is people are poor, and with the amount of money that a lot of us have, it's really difficult to be able to, buy a whole bunch of different foods that will keep us healthy. It's hard to know what food to eat. And, we have to figure out how to, within our budget and capability, consume things that are good for us and avoid what is not good for us. And it pretty much boils down to basic health and things like that. As far as depression, I think that people go through periods of time in their life where they're depressed, and we have to work through those. Some people, there are a few different types of depression. Some people feel that they have a chemical imbalance in their mind that makes them depressed. And if that really is the case, which I kind of feel like I might have too, I take kratom for that. kratom is a legal herb in the coffee family that I take a few times a day, and I think that's a pretty innocuous and harmless solution to depression. I've been depressed, and I think if it's a chemical imbalance, I think it would be best to look at what is the cause of that. Maybe in the womb, the mother consumed something that damaged the child, or maybe consuming things growing up made something happen. I don't really know yet, but
Yeah, I think that that's an important point, man. That there, especially in the line of research that we do, as far as talking about pollutants in the air, waters, in everything, in the food, that there's so many different alternative sources that lead to cancers, that lead to illnesses, that lead to chemical imbalances, depression. And I've gotten more into the mindset whenever I feel something going on with my body, whether it's physically or just like if I feel out of line, I try to just do sort of a self-examination, like, okay, have I ate anything differently? Has my behavior been differently? Because it's important out there for each individual, conscious individual, to recognize the food that you put in your body. It matters, what was put into that food. And I would also say, if you're a meat eater, the experiences that animal experience as well will affect you by taking in that energy. So there's just so many other alternative sources that can affect your mood, your feeling, your emotion. And like you said, we go through stages. Just because you're feeling down for a period of time doesn't mean that you won't be able to make your way through that. And just jumping straight to taking pills doesn't seem to be helping a lot of people. It does seem like that we can find a more natural, I hate to say it, but organic way to treat ourselves and to find a way to live. And I do want to make a suggestion here and get your thoughts on this, because see, I'm always solutions oriented and trying to figure out ways to grow this as a community effort, right? And we've been really promoting the ideas of freedom cells, of autonomous peer groups, 7, 8, 10 individuals coming together for common cause and helping each other get off grid, helping each other become more educated, helping each other become prepared for emergencies. But you could also include in that helping each other become healthier. So maybe you have a freedom cell and you meet on a regular basis and y'all discuss food tips, or you go out and grow gardens together. There's so many ways to take this concept, and also in line with that, the ideas, the strategies of agorism, agorism, of working outside the state and building counter institutions have never been more important, because when we recognize the corruption that you point out, whether it's Monsanto, Bayer, all the different pharmaceutical companies, they all have huge sway and power in this country. And if you want to get away from that, growing your own food, growing herbs for natural medicines, because it's just constantly amazing to me the cures and the remedies I find out about, from just looking at for a natural cure, natural medicine, rather than like, I don't have insurance, right? If I want to go treat something, like a couple months ago I had a staph infection, like briefly, dude, and I was like, oh my god, this, like, I don't want this to get really bad, I'm gonna have to go to the hospital, it's gonna cost all this money because I don't have a doctor, I don't have insurance. But I looked up like a natural remedy. I looked up like oils, and oil of oregano is extremely powerful, and I used that, and I swear, dude, within days, like, all the skin on there just kind of fell off and like was reborn like fresh. The whole like wound, it like just went down, went away. There's just that's just one example. And again, there's going to be times when you might need Western medicine, so we're not trying to just completely abolish that, but this reliance on pills, and I think it's also part of the deeper sort of mentality of the Western world, which is a quick fix. People would rather just take a pill and think that that's going to take care of everything, rather than, I have to apply an oil a couple times a day, or I have to change my diet, or I have to do, what I mean? Like, it's easy. They think it's easy, but in the long run, these things are causing more harm than good. So any thoughts on that, in relation to counter-economic health?
I think that one of the main sources of people's depression is the fact that they don't know what to do in life. They don't know what to put their energy towards to make something great, to be proud of something. And when we learn this, we can put our energy towards making something. What if a depressed person learned about this and decided that they want to grow herbs and they want to start maybe a business where they sell naturopathic remedies? Maybe that would cure their depression. They would have something to do and something that would make them feel good because they've helped someone else. They've learned something. I think that we have to derive satisfaction from creating things, accomplishing things, and knowing things. And the best antidepressant in the world is having a clarity from knowing how everything works, knowing that you're doing the right thing, doing something good for people. And this type of dynamic in a community or a freedom cell where people have their niches, their things they love to do, and everyone comes to this person with their niche and they give you their herbs and everything, that would be in itself an antidepressant, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree. You got to give yourself, just as far as depression goes, you got to give yourself motivation. You got to get out there and get involved and do something. I know that that's what helped me out in my drug addiction, and my drug addiction was sparked by my depression and by my confusion in that realm. And once I realized that there was something worth living for, and I gave myself things to do and just not just busy work, but got motivated about life again, it made things a lot more fun. So having a community, being a part of that effort can definitely help. I really appreciate your time, man. Go ahead and let everybody know where they can find all your work, and then anything else you want to leave the audience with.
All right. You can find my work at Era of Wisdom on Facebook, eraofwisdom.org. We have a YouTube channel now, and I'm making videos, maybe 2-3 videos a week, and republishing the best content I find every day on Era of Wisdom. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, man. I really appreciate the work you're doing, and please continue to do what you do.
All right, man. Much love.
Peace.